Secrets of forgotten internet history. The monsters which once haunted forums and message boards rise again, once more, for their revenge.
This episode is about lost episodes, actually. We got a good selection here of a couple of creepypastas, specifically about TV shows that have a creepy episode that aired and kind of caused other negative effects to happen in real life. That's really what we're going for here.
Yes, the first one we'll be looking at today is a very, very famous, or maybe infamous one, Dead Bart. I remember listening to this and being super freaked out by it, like really freaked out, to the point where it was one of the ones that I would barely ever actually listen to because it scared me so much.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't suspect the same result.
After what happened with Russian sleep experiment last time, I agree.
Yeah, the high expectation ones are not turning out so well.
Yeah.
Give us a summary of Dead Bart.
Okay, so Dead Bart is the result of this fan interacting with the creator of The Simpsons and kind of finding this lost episode of The Simpsons where Bart dies. Kind of a gruesome death. He is sucked out of the window of an airplane and apparently his very realistic, lifeless body is shown. Kind of like one of those SpongeBob shots where it's just like animated and then it zooms in for half a second and it's like the most realistic image of like a pair of eyeballs that you've ever seen with crust. That's kind of what I imagined with it. And then basically what happens is they talk about the episode a little bit more. We get to the end, they're at the grave for Bart, and there's a bunch of other actors who've all guest starred, and then it's predicting their death dates. So there's ones where it has like Michael Jackson's death date. I think that's the one that they specifically mentioned. But the little creepy psychological line here at the end is, oh, we could guess the rest of the actors, but most of them have the same date, kind of referencing the idea that in some way the Simpsons know when the world or when a bunch of people are going to die for some weird cause.
Yeah, there's two major elements to this story that I think lend to it being so popular back in the day. Number one is the basic like canned like pre-packaged result of a or impact of a lost episode creepypasta, where you have it's not just that it's a lost episode or an episode that was never aired, because those are obviously something that exists in reality, right? Lost episodes of TV shows that were made but never aired for whatever reason. These lost episode creepypastas usually make it so that this lost episode is like, you know, there's something supernatural about it. There's something that's very like disturbing about it. It's not just an episode that wasn't aired. It's like an episode that like can't be aired and shouldn't be seen because of its absurdly disturbing content. And the reason I say it's pre-packaged or canned is because there's just like an instant inherent feeling of kind of creepiness when you take something like particularly a cartoon show that's normally very lighthearted, very humorous, and in no way like disturbing. When you take something like that and you kind of just like flip it on its head, it's like, oh, what if The Simpsons was like gory and depressing? The other thing is, like you mentioned, of course, the reference to like a Bart apocalypse, where where everybody's death date is listed as the same. That yeah, like you said, they mentioned Michael Jackson and George Harrison, who would of course go on to die following the episode's apparent original date, which they said was 1989, and then the fact that a bunch of other celebrities who hadn't even appeared on the show yet, that their death dates were all on the same date, implying, of course, that episode is predicting some sort of apocalyptic event where everybody dies. So those two things make this story just kind of bound to be a little bit unnerving if you're young and you're not really accustomed to actual horror. But that's the two, at least, main brief things I would say about it now.
So one of the big things I want to talk about is actually the fact that The Simpsons is very kind of famous for predicting a lot of things, right? That's kind of a trope for The Simpsons at this point, even if it's just little gags. I know a lot of the famous ones recently have been like with Donald Trump, like the one with him on the escalator, or the one with him holding the like magic crystal ball. I don't actually know the truth if any of those are real, but I know whenever a significant historical event happens, typically I see a version of that event in The Simpsons, and they're like, they predicted this back in 2005. So I don't know, this came out in 2010, I don't know how popular that kind of trope for The Simpsons was, but I do like that that's kind of relying on that as its core for the video, that there is actually some kind of prediction that The Simpsons has, and now they accidentally predicted this very horrible event where at least a bunch of famous people, obviously implying that more than just the famous people are going to be dying in that situation.
I don't know. It is very, very simple. You know, it has the hallmarks of a lost episode creepypasta. You have talking about the creator of the show, where the creator of this show is a character in the story, and they act all weird. And then you have like this, inexplicably strange lost episode. It's like, the question would be like, what is this? Like, how was it made? Like, why was it made? Like, were the creators like forced by some supernatural entity to make this? Were they just like popping off one day and they just made it? Like it doesn't. The premise itself is like, okay, why? Like, why does this exist, and why is it? I don't know. Just why is it a thing? I think, again, like I said, like it plays off of the idea of these things being in The Simpsons. Like, if you were to actually see an episode like this, like, you would probably be like taken aback, if a normal Simpsons episode was just like, it just had Bart getting sucked out of a plane and dying. Like, okay, you'd be like, what? Like, you'd be waiting for like the joke, you'd be waiting for like the punchline. But if it was just like this weird like disturbing imagery of his death, and then you have like, the realistic, you have the realistic crying, and then you have like it cutting to like, it's, what did they say, it was just like Homer and Marge, and like there was no baby and no pets anymore. It's kind of like somebody just thought of a mix of like creepy elements, and it was just like, just throw it all into this.
Slap it into a Simpsons episode, so that the Simpsons episode is what has the weight behind it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's pretty much what happened, and I don't think there was too much thought that went into it. I think somebody just wanted to make something creepy. It really takes a turn, because the whole episode is just kind of like, okay, this is like a creepy episode about like, what if Bart died, and like what would that do to the Simpsons family? They're crying, they become thin and like they lose other members of the family. Like, okay, like you're just kind of like, okay, this is weird and like kind of disturbing. But then it's like, then it just takes like this crazy turn at the end where it's like, yeah, and also the episode predicts like the date of the apocalypse. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Didn't think we were going in that direction, but
I there's no hints at supernatural. There's only hints at things just being kind of weird. And yeah, so it becomes this episode where Matt Groening is realized that he predicted the apocalypse.
To be honest with you, I kind of forgot until we were like halfway through the story. Like I forgot about the ending. When I think of this story, or when I thought of the story before we listened to it again, like I just remembered like the disturbing imagery in it, particularly the way Bart dies. I don't know, that used to just get me when I was younger. I don't know why, that just like that imagery of him being sucked out of a plane and then like his corpse being shown in like realistic detail. It's so corny. It's so
yes,
so classic creepypasta cliche, but like something about it just made my hair stand up.
Somehow, in something about an animated TV show, they managed to make the creepiness be about a dead corpse, about a dead body. Who would animate that? Why would you animate that? Even the dead bodies in Family Guy are just drawings with like 6 different like sticks coming out of them or something like that, or doing the dead body pose.
Yeah, I guess the question would be like, again, like why does this exist? But then even like me saying that now, it's like, who cares? Like I'm rolling my eyes at my own self, because it's like, dude, it's a lost episode creepypasta about the Simpsons. Like I'm sitting here trying to like fix it and being like, okay, the story could get into, you know, why this existed and what, you know, what its meaning was, and it's like, dude, like the story is nothing. It's as simple as, hey, this normally innocent, lighthearted cartoon show now has this disturbing imagery of someone dying in a gruesome manner, and then all of the characters react to it in a hyper-realistic fashion, and then it ends with a reference to the literal end of the world. Like, it's as silly and stupid as it gets, and it rides entirely on just the simple basic fact of the innocent thing turned creepy, which is just very basic.
So at least this one made enough of an impact that I've heard of it being a lost episode. However, I don't think this passes in that level of like realism that it's a lost episode. It's one of those ones where once you read the actual story, you go, no, this is fake. This is not an actual lost episode. And I think that's where it loses me the most. I think the big thing for a lost episode creepypasta is how realistic of a lost episode it is, and this one just does not get me. I think for me, the big thing is, although I don't think it's realistic, I definitely think you could pass it on. Oh, there's a lost episode of Bart dying, and it's really creepy because they show his dead body. Oh, and then at the end, it predicts the apocalypse. It's like, that's kind of, we talked about this internet campfire story. This 100% fits into that build of an internet campfire story, and I think that's why it became popular, because this one is easy to reproduce. I think even if you take out some of the stuff, like, oh, during Act 2, all they were doing was crying, it's still easy to kind of get the creepiness of it grasped, and I think that's really why it's popular. I think quality is never why it's popular. It's usually repostability, and this one seems to be pretty repostable.
Yeah, the premise is simple and believable enough to where it could easily become a kind of internet urban legend, even though it was evidently always intended to be fictional. Yeah, it's you can see, you know, kids talking about this as though it was real, because hey, the idea of a lost episode is a real thing, and the idea of it being about Bart dying and something like that, like, yeah, it's, when you read the story, it's obviously unbelievable, but like you said, just the premise alone is like, okay, this could be something that that could be passed on as believable, at least among people who are impressionable and naive.
It's pretty average, I would say. Right about there.
And made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body.
The next story we'll be listening to today is Cove. This was not one that I was familiar with back in the day. I knew what it was. I never actually listened to it, though. And funnily enough, until the recording of this video, I actually just assumed that Cove was a real show, and that this was a lost episode, like, of a real show, and that the lost episode part was the only fake part. Turns out the whole thing is just fake. There's no such thing as Cove at all. So I don't know. It's like we're watching. I think we're watching like a lost episode about a show that doesn't even exist, basically. So it's kind of like double the creepy. But well, so I'm going into this blind. So as you could tell, it's not like a story. It's not like a narrative that someone's written out. It's essentially as though you're reading a chat log on a forum.
I don't remember which station, but I do remember that it was on at a weird time, like 4 p.m.
It seems really familiar to me. I grew up outside of Ashland and was 9 years old in 72. Cove. Was it about pirates?
People are talking about a show that they used to watch, and it's kind of like mildly creepy. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, this was like a weird show that we used to watch, and it was only on this one channel, and it was only around for a little bit, and then the big twist at the end is that turns out what they were watching must have been some kind of weird supernatural or weird like cursed thing, because they were just watching static.
It's weird because a bunch of them watched it,
Mm-hmm.
or a bunch of them were remembering this thing and remembering clear and agreeing upon clear facts about it. The little girl, Percy the pirate, the description of the pirate ship, stuff like that.
My brain is like so rotted by these like by bad creepypastas. Like the whole time I was kind of sitting there like, okay, when is it going to get to like the corny, like, you know, gore and all this stuff, because I've never really sat and like fully listened to the story. But to be honest with you, that ending, like, that was good.
No, I really liked the non-traditional way of storytelling. It surprised me. I wanted to talk about that and kind of focus on that a little bit because I think it was done so well. I think it was actually done pretty interestingly because, like we were kind of talking, there was no plot, there was no story. It's just people recalling information. But I don't think that takes away from it. I think it actually, the way all the stuff is presented, the story per se is recalling the information. Recalling all the creepy stuff that was happening, and then the resolution being that it was all fake makes it just weird that all these people were remembering. And I think it actually really works in the benefit of the story to tell it in this manner. Like, imagine if this one was a traditional story and it was like not told just over these like texts. I feel like it would actually be a lot worse.
Yeah, if it was the typical, like, if it was like Dead Bart, which we just listened to, if it was like Dead Bart, where it's just somebody like explaining a story about what they saw, it would be very interesting. The thing about this story is that at its essence, it is an internet horror story. And I don't just mean that because it's like a, you know, passed on the internet. Like, the story itself lends itself to internet culture. It's a fake chat log, and that adds to the relatability of it. It adds to the believability of it, and it adds to just, I don't know, the general atmosphere of it. Because you're not just listening to somebody explaining something to you, It's as though you are a witness to a conversation that's happening.
Yeah, 100%. It's like you're coming into a Reddit forum a year afterwards because you're also looking for the same information. Maybe like the start of the story, I'm implying this was not in the story, but like the start of the story is you're looking up Candle Cove or remembering Candle Cove or something like that, and then you see this like forum, and then it ends like that. I really like that kind of twist or that kind of like look on the show or on the story, and yeah, I 100% just think it adds to it being that way. Like you said, full internet horror story right here.
Something like, again, to compare it to Dead Bart. Dead Bart is like, this person is explaining it, and I don't know how to like say this right to make it make sense. Like, let me know if this is confusing. Like, the whole time the author is writing the Dead Bart story, like, let's just obviously pretend like he's really recalling a story that actually happened. Like, the whole time the narrator knows what's coming at the end, right? The narrator knows that at the end he's going to say, yeah, and it predicts the Bartpocalypse. Like, the whole time that's just like ready for, he knows,
He knows it'll eventually come to that ending line.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really come as a shock to the narrator because he's telling all of this after it's happened in the past tense, after he's already seen it. This, however, the situation develops along with the viewer, or with, the reader. Where, like you said, it's like you're reading a chat log because you're interested in learning about this Candle Cove thing, and the characters. I mean, it's just basic storytelling, right? It's good storytelling. The characters and the audience are coming to this realization at the same time, and that is really cool.
And yeah, I think it really also lends itself that basically the first like 60-70% is like lighthearted. They're talking about the laughing stock, little bit creepy with the go inside thing with the ship, but overall they're really like they like it. They're remembering it fondly, and it's not until the very end where they start talking about the screaming thing does it actually start to get a little creepy. So I think, like you said, it's as though it's diving down and it's kind of going into this hole. Starts off as this fond memory. Us as the reader, we're like, oh, okay, cool. This is a cool show. Pirates. Maybe the moral of the show is like about courage. Oh, go inside, and then you keep going and you get to the skin taker, and you're like, wait, everything else in the show, other than maybe like. Because even the description of Percy, where they're like, oh, he was like a cheap doll, like that is so common in old shows where they just had no funding and they just had this main character doll that they were using. But then it delves down even further, and you get to the part with the skin taker and the screaming, all the puppets screaming, and you're just like, wait, where in the world did this come from? But it felt natural. Like, it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. It felt like we were going down that path of realization very naturally. It felt very, just smooth. I think out of all of the stories we've looked at, including some of the ones we've looked at, I'm clicking around for a second, including the ones we looked at last time, this one is very smooth with its storytelling. There's nothing that just like abruptly happens. I'll reference our last episode, the psychologist. It's just like you show up and suddenly all the horror has happened. We go from, oh, I'm outside talking to the neighbor, they haven't gardened in a while. He walks inside and he sees 4 dead bodies. That is not how this one's gradually becoming creepier, gradually becoming actually like horror, and I think it just does very well with that. I actually really liked it.
Yeah, it like actually kind of earns its twist ending, and its twist ending isn't just like a final like creepy gore like or whatever. Like the whole story, like you said, it kind of is gradually building, and it's not like overly creepy. There's no gore, there's no ridiculous nonsense. So that final entry in the forum post that's like, yeah, my mom said that when I watched that show, I was staring at static. It's like, oh, like that it kind of opens this door. It's like, that's not what I was expecting. It wasn't just one final memory about, and then there was this one episode where there was flashing, dead bodies on the screen.
Yeah,
it was like no, like, oh, like something, like something was really wrong here, because what were they watching? What were they seeing?
And something we haven't talked about with any of these shows, something that's big for me when watching a TV show or a movie with a twist. Obviously, we're going to talk about Empire Strikes Back when we talk about twists, is when you go back and you go through and the twist is about to happen, and rewatching or rereading, you're like, oh my gosh, wait, I think this one actually does a really good job, because let me find the exact spot I'm thinking of where like they're trying to remember what specific channel it's on. It's like, it was on channel 58. Like, oh wait, well, they can't remember what the actual station was because there was no station. It was just a blurred channel. They can't remember the girl's name. It's like, okay, they're having these very specific memories that when I'm reading it again, I'm just like, oh, yeah, like this is something happening that was real to these people, but very clearly isn't real. I don't know. It's just, I think a second read of this is the only one that like I've gone through and I'm rereading. I'm just like, this is creepier now that I know the twist.
Yeah, it definitely lends itself to a good twist. It's a story that, funnily enough, is one of those creepypastas that became so popular and so well known that people genuinely think it's real. There's lots of people who claim that I remember seeing Candle Cove, and lots of people claiming that this actually existed.
The only thing that is weird, I guess, is the creepiness of the actual show. So like the skin taker and the actual portion where they're screaming feels a little weird. Feels actually a little out of place, right? I think I was talking earlier about the gradual incline into the creepiness, but with it being eventually realized as a supernatural show, those portions feel a little out of place to me. It feels like they were trying to get a little bit of gore in there. Oh my gosh, was his hat made out of children's skin? Oh my god, like they were trying to go for a little bit of that. And I'm glad it quickly realized that was not where it needed to go. It was just trying to add a little bit of creepiness to the show in general. The only thing I will say about it, though, is it adds to that weird thing, because these kids are remembering this very weird episode of the show. So not just remembering things about the show as a whole, they're remembering this one very specific, very weird episode, and it didn't even happen. That, I think, eventually adds up to be better, but I don't think any of the gore got to me. I don't think any, like I said, like the children's skin hat, like that wasn't creepy. That was not adding to the creepiness, but it was making it, eventually the twist made that portion better.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does, and it kind of slightly starts to trail off into that, like, really, really cliche, like, cringe stuff. But I think it, like you said, it just kind of tapers that off just enough for it to be good. And I think that the twist is good, you know?
Yeah, it left it open to your imagination, too. Oh, was this magical? Was this, like, psychological? Like, the first thing I thought of was actually, oh, it's like at something where only kids could see it and the adults couldn't see it. Like, it's one of those situations where, oh, you, like elves or something, where you have to believe it to see that it's there, and the parents were like, never saw it or something like that. That's the first thing I thought of. I'll actually give this one four screaming children out of 5 Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah, I can abide by that.
Oh, I'm so relieved that other people remember this terrible show.
Okay, so this is going to be our final one for today. A very famous short story creepypasta. Sadly, we cannot say the full name of it. A lot of you might know it as Squidward's blank. We cannot say that last word. So we're going to be referring to it as Red Mist for the majority of today. But this one is very famous. This one is probably one of the ones I know about, even though I have no experience or knowledge of a lot of creepypastas. So I have heard about this one. But yeah, let's get into it. Alrighty, give us a big old summary right there.
Okay, so Red Mist is a story about a Nickelodeon intern who goes to watch like a preview or whatever, or like a pre-screening of an episode of SpongeBob. And this episode turns out to be a spooky, scary, lost episode. A very, very strange and disturbing episode about Squidward. And he goes and, is being booed by realistic eyes. And then he goes back and he deletes himself. And intermixed into all this is footage and pictures of some sort of unaliving of people. I'm just trying to stave off the algorithm. Yeah. So that's about it. That is about it.
Really, my baseline opinion of this is it was really boring. This was not anything really exciting. Clearly, the writer has an obsession with eyeballs because there are multiple references to realistic eyes, and then the eyes of the people, the real people in the picture being like an eye dangling out or something like that.
Everyone had hyper-realistic eyes. One eye dangling over its upturned face, and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism. The right eye popped and dangling. One eye dangling on what's left of his head, above the floor.
There was 2 vomit checks, which is really funny.
I had to choke back vomit. I vomited on the floor.
Yeah, but the big portion, the titular portion, the red mist portion, kind of just happens quickly, and that's it. It is one paragraph of this entire story about the titular portion.
There's really not much to say about this story. It's a very, very, very typical lost episode creepypasta. I'm not really sure why this particular one got so famous. I think because it is just so over the top. And I think it largely became popular because of the media that followed it. I found a Reddit post that was made by the actual creator of this story. And he mentioned how, believe it or not, he had based this story off of inspiration from reading Dead Bart. Other people made videos, which is where that term red mist comes from. I'm not sure exactly why the original videos and stuff that were made to kind of recreate what the lost episode might look like. I don't know why it was called Red Mist instead of the actual title of the story. But either way, these videos became very popular in their own right, even though they're horrible. They're very, very poorly made. But that particular image of Squidward with the dark, creepy eyes or whatever staring at the camera has become incredibly popular. Even so much so to the point that it was actually directly referenced in an episode of SpongeBob, which is crazy to me. Yeah, the section of the SpongeBob episode that very clearly directly references that image has been since removed from that that episode. So when that episode airs on television, it's that part of it is cut out, which is kind of funny because it kind of brings everything full circle, because now there kind of legitimately is a lost part of an episode that includes the red mist.
Creepypasta.
Yeah.
Like eyes, yeah.
Yeah, it's
That is,
kind of
yes.
funny.
My opinion on this, not a good creepypasta in any means. I just understand why it got popular though, because I feel like it was decent back in the day. Reviewing, going back to it as adults, we're looking at it and going, yeah, this is horrible. But as like a kid, you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrifying. And it's about SpongeBob. You as a kid are probably like, oh my gosh, I watched SpongeBob, that's so creepy. I just don't think it's very good.
Yeah, again, it's exactly like we said about what was the first one, Dead Bart, where the whole premise is taking something that is innocent and lighthearted and like just throwing into it something very disturbing, something that's like patently disturbing, right? There's, unalived images of unalived, like that's creepy, right? You're just throwing it into the story. It's too easy, and it's very, in that sense, it's very uncreative. But it's bound, like you said, it's bound to make a kid like, whoa, that's really creepy, that scared me. And again, the proof is in the pudding. It has become extremely popular. The fact that it's bad, that it's just obviously a bad story and it's super corny and really dumb, like, kind of doesn't really matter. It became popular. It scared a lot of people. It served exactly what its intention was. Don't think it was good, though. Definitely think it's a mid story.
If you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed.
You can get started with Dead Bart.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think Dead Bart was definitely very, very middle of the road. When I think of it, I think of the ending, which, while it definitely comes out of nowhere, it's kind of a slightly neat ending with the whole, like, all the gravestones with the same date on it. I think, to be honest, I would probably put it in, like, the C tier.
Okay, so I agree with you, but I think it's C tier above Russian Sleep Experiment. I like to put mine in order. I think it's better than Russian Sleep Experiment, but I agree with it being in C tier. Big thing for me that I actually did like about it, it was at least more of a complete story than Red Mist, than the Squidward story. Because at least this one, the ending kind of came full circle. The whole episode obviously was very creepy, but the whole portion at the beginning where they're trying to hide the episode, it's clear that they're trying to hide the episode because at the very end, they predicted the future of all the deaths. I also really like that it kind of ties into the fact that IRL, The Simpsons have predicted a lot of stuff. I think the if that twist was to come from any show, The Simpsons would be the show that I would say that should come from. So I do appreciate that. But overall, for storytelling wise, I think it's just mediocre. Definitely better than Russian Sleep Experiment, though.
Fair enough, yeah.
I'm going to get started on Candle Cove. I think this is an A tier, and I think it's better than Gateway of the Mind. It might be close to S tier for me. It might be on the end of S tier for me. So if you would put it there, I would respect that. But so good. I actually really like Candle Cove. Like we're talking about the chat depiction. It's a true internet campfire, having the fake internet chat log being about a fake TV show. I think they didn't delve too much into pointless gore. They didn't delve too much into kind of trailing along to random weird sections that ultimately, like, everything that they talked about had a purpose. It had a reason for being the way that it was. So I think that was really good. I think, though, but the big thing for me is the way that the story was told. Interesting. Significantly better than anything else we've heard. So, yeah, that's my opinion on Candle Cove.
I would agree entirely. I think it was really good. I would definitely put it in A tier above Gateway of the Mind. It was perfect in what it was. Well, not perfect in the sense that it was without any kind of need for improvement, but I think it was perfect in that it was a really, really good way to present a kind of story. It's a very unconventional story, right? It's very internet because it's not a narrative. It's a chat log. It's a mock chat log. It's just unnerving enough as the story is going along that you're like, okay, like you're kind of interested, but you're not like revolted by like unnecessary gore. And then the ending, the twist ending, is great. It's really good. It really immerses you, and then it drops that on you at the end. It's good. I think it's worthy of its popularity.
Okay, Red Mist. Where would you put Red Mist?
Red Mist. So I'm a little conflicted about what to do with Red Mist. I would probably put it at the current bottom of the C tier. I think it was not so bad. See, the problem is something like Psychologist is attempting to be a long narrative, and it fails. The genre is a lost episode, so it kind of lends itself to a much shorter, much simpler premise, and I think it executes it about as well as any typical lost episode story can do, but it's not good. It's not good at all, but it's not so horrible and such a failure that I'd put it in D or F, so I'd probably put it at the end of C.
So I was actually, I'm conflicted too about, it's for sure either bottom of C or top of D. So when something like that happens to me, I need to compare it to the other stuff that's there. So the big thing for me is that The Psychologist, the story itself didn't make sense. There were so many like plot holes. There were so many portions where we were just like, what is going on? There were so many portions where like, oh, well, this could never happen. This would never happen. This story is impossible to happen. And then when I think of Red Mist, I don't think that. I do think it's very obviously in far right field, or far left field, whatever the saying is. But I just don't have the same distaste for it that I do The Psychologist. So, comparatively though, Dead Bart and Russian Sleep Experiment have that same level to me, where it's a little bit shorter, but I was just bored listening to it. They just didn't get to me. Comparatively to Russian Sleep Experiment, comes to a screeching halt just to talk about all the random pointless gore, and then the plot kind of spins up for the last paragraph about. So I think comparatively, right next to Russian Sleep Experiment, I fully agree with that. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between like corniness and like incompetence. When you're writing a lost episode, there's pretty much like, it's like a cookie cutter story. You know exactly what you're getting into when you're reading it, and I know the author knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote it. You find a show and you make some creepy story where, we watched the episode and it was so disturbing, and then they died. It's like, okay, I get it. It's corny, so it's bad. But then something like Psychologist that's trying to be like an original story and is like trying to like weave like an actual tale, and it fails so miserably, it's like, bro, it's not even worth your time.
Alrighty guys, so that was our lost episode Creepypasta review. If you liked this kind of content, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. We have another episode on our channel, our previous episode 1, about experiments gone wrong. Those are the other creepypastas that you saw at the tier list there at the end, so please go consider checking that out too. Other than that though, see you all in the next video. Hope you all enjoyed.